Hi, Patrick. Welcome back. Really glad to have you back in my podcast, and thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Joseph, for having me back. I'm doing well. I'm still carnivore, and it's great to be back on your podcast.
Awesome to hear about the carnivore. Yeah. Patrick, before we jump in, can you tell me a bit about yourself? How you discovered carnivore? How did it all start for you?
Yeah, so I started my health journey basically in March 2024. That's when I got on the keto diet. And I did it largely because I had heard that it can help with allergies. And sure enough, that did fix my allergy issue. But then it also fixed my joint pain issue, plantar fasciitis in my foot, tendonitis in my knee, and lower back pain. All of those went away as well. And then when I started keto, it was really like a sort of meat-based version of keto. And eventually that transitioned into full-blown carnivore about half a year. So I did like half a year on keto. And then I've been on carnivore, for about 20 months now. And yeah, that's going well. And the food that I eat is very simple. I eat probably like 70% of my food's beef. And then I eat also some pork, some fish, some dairy, and yeah, just basic stuff. So, but mostly beef. And my health has never been better. Throughout those 20 months on carnivore, I haven't been sick once. And so that's the first time in my life that I've gone like a year without being sick. So there's something really fascinating, how I don't get sick anymore. And I do have kids, and they're on the carnivore diet as well. And that's been an interesting journey. It's been helpful for them as well. I mean, all of us have gone through sort of detox processes where when we can get into that, basically our whole family had to go through oxalate dumping where, I had kidney pain, painful urination. And my son had sort of like oxalates coming out of his eyes. So he had like pain in his eyes from the oxalates. So all of us kind of went through some oxalate dumping, but that was last year. That was 2025. And now in the year 2026, we're sort of going through a second detox process, which is like toxic metals, because the carnivore diet cuts out a lot of toxic metals. And we're tracking that with hair tissue mineral analysis. So, and it's showing up on our hair tissue analysis. So we're noticing that we're dumping out that as well. So anyway, it's not easy to go through detox. But fortunately the carnivore diet allows you to do that. And, I think that my kids have benefited from this in several ways. My daughter, who is now 9 years old, she used to have violent temper tantrums before we got on the diet. And then now those are gone. Like, so she doesn't have temper tantrums anymore. That's great. And I would say my 11-year-old son, my oldest son, he had a bunch of neurological issues like lack of coordination in sports and night terrors at night. Those have gone away. So now he's actually good at sports. He's doing Taekwondo. He now is a purple belt. And so he's doing very well. And, I still think that because we're going through the detox, especially with the toxic metals, I noticed that with my son, he is having some temper tantrums again. He used to have a lot of temper tantrums, and then on carnivore, the temper tantrums went away. But now they're kind of back again. But I think that's because of the toxic metal dumping for him. So I'm still very hopeful that those will go away as well. For my 6-year-old son, he had a dramatic improvement in his IQ. He was a special needs kid where he was mentally delayed. And he had that diagnosis at age 2. And then age 3 is when he got on the keto diet. And then in age 4, he went full carnivore. And then now he's actually a normal kid. He doesn't have a special need anymore. He's not mentally delayed. He's fully caught up to grade level. And in fact, he's actually advanced in math for his age. And so he was the one that I would say probably benefited the most out of all the kids from the carnivore diet, because he had just like a big jump in his IQ just from eating meat. So yeah, I think that we've had a successful story on carnivore, and we're going to stick with it. So yeah.
That's amazing, Patrick. I'm really glad to hear the update from you and your family about this whole lifestyle. Your family's probably the first one I know that's, the whole family's doing the carnivore. So I think it's pretty awesome, and so much success like coming out of you guys and then sharing it with us. I've been following your channel, like the shorts, especially the YouTube shorts, and I know you share a lot of your knowledge and your perspective, like really awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Patrick, I wanted to ask you some question about the theory that you had about the cancer. I know it's called the toxic sequestration theory, right? And I've been following this for quite some time. And can you talk a little bit about this theory, and then we'll dive in, to more questions.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mentioned that on the carnivore diet, I went through some detoxes, which means that my body was kind of dumping out toxins. And so it definitely made me appreciate that I had toxins accumulated in my body. I think I have like Sally Norton's book right behind me, the Toxic Superfoods book, which is about oxalates. And so I got an appreciation on carnivore that, I had all these toxins stored up. And so carnivore was finally allowing me to dump these out. But I started to dive into things like oxalates and toxic metals and other types of toxins, deuterium, which is heavy hydrogen. And I just started to try to learn more. I wanted to understand, why is it the carnivore diet does seem to work so well? And then that got me down the path of trying to formulate like a toxicity-based theory of disease, sort of trying to understand diseases like autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, et cetera, in terms of toxins. And, could we interpret it like that? Because it's a sort of simple view, because if all disease has like a common root cause, namely toxins, then we could actually explain, say, why the carnivore diet works so well at healing many conditions just by saying something like the carnivore cuts out the most toxins, right? Carnivore diet cuts out the most toxins. And so, but I started to follow people like Stephanie Seneff, who's an MIT senior researcher. And I listened to a podcast between her and Anthony Chafee. And in that podcast, she presented a very unusual view of cancer. She basically was saying that cancer tumors were not only not being selfish, they were actually unselfishly hoarding toxins in order to protect the rest of the body. And she's a well-accomplished researcher. She's been at MIT for decades. And so I took her very seriously, right? Like when an MIT senior researcher says, this is my theory of cancer, I took her very seriously. And she was focused on a particular toxin, which is deuterium, that's heavy hydrogen. And sure enough, deuterium is low on the carnivore diet. So that aligned well with me, because I was trying to figure out why the carnivore diet works so well. And so then I actually emailed Stephanie Seneff and I said, hey, could I like work together with you? And she sent me some research papers and I read them. And, she just said, keep thinking about it. And so I did keep thinking about it. And a month later, I listened to another podcaster. His name is Garrett Smith. He's a medical doctor and he treats people for toxicity, namely toxic metals. And he repeated the exact same theory, but from the perspective of toxic metals. And he said that cancer cells hoard toxic metals in order, things like heavy metals like mercury, cadmium, lead, arsenic, in order to protect the body from the toxicity of those metals. And so then I just heard the same theory twice from two different people. Stephanie Seneff stated the theory for deuterium, and then Garrett Smith stated the theory for toxic metals. But it was both from this very strange angle that cancer tumors were actually protecting the body rather than being harmful. And so I thought, okay, there must be something to this. And so that's what launched my theory, which is TST, or Toxin Sequestration Theory. I put out that theory at the beginning of March of this year as a blog post on Substack. And what the theory said is that that basically, shockingly, cancer is actually not a disease. The true disease is actually toxic overload, and cancer is just a symptom of toxic overload. And it also said that we can think of cancer tumors not as malignant, selfish, uncontrollable growth as they are presented in the mainstream, but rather as extra tissue that the body intentionally creates on purpose in order to store and process toxins. In other words, we can think of a cancer tumor as like a detox organ, or we can think of it as a backup liver, because the liver's job is to store and process toxins. And so a cancer tumor would be like a backup liver if you have, say, liver damage. So, and then finally, like, we can get into how do you actually define what a toxin is. And there's like a precise definition of how to define what a toxin is. And that's basically any chemical that produces oxidative damage to the body, basically a chemical that's pro-oxidant, and it produces oxidative damage to the body. And then there's like a long list of chemicals that do that. And then there's other chemicals that don't do that. So like, for example, you can look up on the internet and you can ask, like, does cholesterol create oxidative damage to the body? And the answer is no. So cholesterol is not a toxin. So cancer cells would not try to sequester that. But then you can ask, does oxalate create oxidative damage to the body? And the answer is yes. And so cancer cells do try to sequester that, and oxalate is a toxin. So that's how we define what is a toxin and what's not a toxin, is does it create oxidative damage to the body's tissues? Okay, so that's my cancer theory. And, I've been trying to push it further, and we can dive deeper into like how it actually extends beyond cancer. More recently, I've been trying to just think of it as follows. Basically, anytime the body builds extra tissue, it's doing it for a reason. And there's a broader underlying philosophy behind this theory, which is that our bodies are brilliant, amazing, and strategic. And if we think of our bodies as brilliant, amazing, and strategic, then our bodies aren't making mistakes. They do things on purpose. And so the case of disease like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and autism, those are real diseases where the tissue is actually getting destroyed. So the healthy tissue is actually getting destroyed. But then all these other cases where the body is actually building new tissue, that's what I'm interpreting as not a disease. So we can go down the list of when does the body build new tissue. And of course, cancer tumors is a great example of that, but it's not the only case. There's also obesity. So obesity is a case where the body builds fat tissue. And then similarly, we can say, oh, what if obesity also is not a disease? Maybe we've been misinformed on obesity as well, and that's not a disease either. And that they're just trying to sell us these GLP-1 drugs to treat something that's actually not a disease. And once again, you can show in the literature that fat tissue acts very similarly to cancer tissue in the sense that it also stores toxins. And so it looks like obesity is yet another defense mechanism against toxicity, where the body creates extra tissue to store toxins. And then there's all other kinds of cases where think of all the cases where the body builds extra tissue, like all the skin growths. So like skin tags, moles, cherry angiomas, lipomas, age spots. Anytime the body is building extra tissue, believe it or not, it's actually a toxin storage vault. It's a way of storing toxins. The same is true for cysts and nodules, so sebaceous cysts in the skin and ovarian cysts in the ovaries, lung nodules in the lungs, and then thyroid nodules. All of these are the body building extra tissue. And so what's, I think, fascinating about this toxin sequestration theory is that it's not just a cancer theory. And it's actually much broader than being a cancer theory. It's basically a theory for how does the body defend itself against toxins. That's what the theory is all about. How does the body defend itself against toxins? And it includes, of course, a theory of cancer, but it's actually really the only theory of cancer that can also explain things like obesity and skin growths and cysts and nodules and things like that as well. Yeah, so that's TST in a nutshell. That's my theory.
Patrick, thank you so much for sharing that. The first thing I wanted to ask is that I've listened to some of your podcast interviews in other channels, and I know you mentioned also this term. I think it's called ROS. I feel like this is central to the theory, right? Can you explain a little bit about that also, about the how it relates to the toxins and I guess categorizing them as the actual, toxic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I mentioned that we define a toxin as anything that creates oxidative damage to the body's tissues. And then if we actually ask, well, what is the molecular mechanism by which that damage occurs? Like what's the underlying microscopic mechanism by which oxidative damage occurs? And that is via what's called ROS, which are reactive oxygen species. They're basically small molecules that have a couple atoms, and they're very unstable. And because they're so unstable, they react with everything. So they'll react indiscriminately with anything in their path. So if you have these ROS inside your cells, then they will react with proteins, they'll react with DNA, they'll react with lipids, they'll react with basically every single molecule around them, and they will damage those molecules. And then once those, basically imagine like sticking on, you have this beautifully constructed protein that the body made to carry out some task, like be an enzyme. And then all of a sudden this ROS came along and started sticking onto the protein. Now you have a damaged protein and it can't do its job anymore. So now you have these damaged biomolecules inside your cells, and now your cell is kind of like non-functional. It's not functioning properly. And you basically have now like dead tissue that's not functioning correctly. And there's a nice analogy to basically burning your tissue, because oxidative damage you can think of as basically the body being burnt from the inside out. Similarly, you can imagine holding your hand over a fire, and then that will burn your body from the outside in, right? So that will like destroy your tissues from the outside in. And now just imagine that the fire is actually inside your body. So that's oxidative damage. And like I said, the molecular mechanism of that are these ROS chemicals. They're small molecules. A good example of that is something called the hydroxyl radical. It's just OH. It's just literally two atoms, like an O and an H, and it's a free radical. It's actually the worst of all the ROS chemicals. And now you might ask, okay, well, where do we get these ROS from? Like, where do they come from? And they come from toxins. And so and basically, if you have a chemical that creates ROS, that is how we define it as a toxin. And then sure enough, all the things that we would think of as toxins create ROS. So like I said, like oxalates, right? Sally Norton's book. So oxalates create ROS. Toxic metals, all the heavy metals, mercury, cadmium, lead, arsenic, they all create ROS. Seed oils, we think of seed oils as toxic. Guess what they do? They create ROS. Sugar, glucose and fructose, believe it or not, can be viewed as toxins. They do create ROS. And this is yet another reason why keto carnivore diets work so well, because they cut out sugar, which in fact is a toxin. And a good way to understand that sugar is a toxin is that people who have diabetes typically have tissue damage. They have damage to their organs, right? So when someone has diabetes, they have chronically elevated blood sugar. And sure enough, those people typically get damage to their kidneys, damage to their arteries, damage to their eyes, and damage to their peripheral nerves. And the reason those tissues preferentially get damaged is because they have the weakest defense against glucose's toxicity, sugar's toxicity. So they aren't able to like downregulate their sugar transport. So anyway, sugar, like, and this is, I admit that this is an unconventional take. Most people don't think of sugar as a toxin, but it is in the medical literature, and it has a precise name. It's called glucotoxicity. That's like a technical name that I pulled from the medical literature. It's called glucotoxicity, and that is the toxicity of sugar, which means it's the tendency of sugar to actually destroy your body's tissues and organs. So that's like the technical name for it. So anyway, that's just yet another example. And then, of course, we can go down the list. There's the traditional old school toxins that in the 1900s were driving disease. So things like cigarette smoke and drinking alcohol. So both cigarette smoke and drinking alcohol, those create ROS as well. And then same with some of the industrial toxins. So things like microplastics and forever chemicals, which are found in the nonstick pans, as well as asbestos, which is an industrial toxin. So all those in benzene is another good example. That's like an industrial solvent found in gasoline. So all of those are industrial toxins. They all create ROS. And so what's beautiful about this is we can take like a list of like 30 different chemicals, all of which people associate with being toxic. And then we can say they all have the same underlying mechanism. They manifest their toxicity all through creating these ROS chemicals. Yeah. And then, like I said, the ROS will then go off and damage the body's tissues and organs. And then you'll be left with dead tissue, right? And then you can think of all these diseases: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, heart disease, kidney disease, Hashimoto's. All of them actually have the same underlying mechanism, which is that, you know, you ingest some toxins, and then the toxins create ROS. The ROS will damage the organ. For example, in the case of Hashimoto's, the ROS damage the thyroid, right? In the case of Alzheimer's, they damage the brain. In the case of cardiovascular disease, they damage the arteries. So, but you basically just give the disease a different name whenever the oxidative damage occurs in a different organ. But I think these names kind of hide the fact that there's a common underlying mechanism behind everything. So yeah, hopefully that explains ROS and its connection to disease. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Patrick. I agree also. This is very different from the conventional approach because, you know, you talk about the mutations are like, you know, a secondary thing. And then the primary would be the oxidative stress, right? And then what is the conventional approach now, which is like the mutation is the primary, and then, you know, the tumor growth control. It's just like a completely different understanding. Patrick, what is the goal of this theory? Like, what do you hope, like, you know, for people to gain from understanding this theory? Like, do you how will it help like people, you know, maybe someone struggling right now with a chronic illness, or maybe for future patients, or like the future medicine?
Yeah, so there's, you know, two angles, which is, you know, how is mainstream medicine currently treating patients, and how might we treat things better if, say, we don't necessarily trust what mainstream medicine is doing. And so naturally, there are still a lot of people who do trust mainstream medicine and are very fearful of conditions like cancer. And I think that's partially by design, because mainstream medicine has engineered a lot of fear around cancer. So, you know, when someone gets a cancer diagnosis, you know, it's obviously a very dramatic experience, and it's something that is presented in a fearful way. So, But what, I feel like my theory is meant to try to give hope to people and to say, hey, there's hope here. You can fix your own problem. You have agency. You are not a victim. And in fact, not only are you not a victim, your body knows what it's doing, and it's actually doing this on purpose. And I build on the work of great people who came before me. I'm not the first person who came up with this theory. I already mentioned Stephanie Seneff and Garrett Smith, but there's another guy. His name is Tom Cowan. He's a doctor. And he also has this exact same theory that cancer tumors are protecting the body from toxins. And he has some beautiful videos on this where he says that if you get a cancer diagnosis, the first thing that you should do is be thankful and grateful to your body for protecting yourself. That's the words that he says, which really flips the script. I mean, that is not really the way people think when they get a cancer diagnosis. But that's what Tom Cowan has said. He says you should, be thankful and be grateful that your body is protecting itself. So the first thing is, let's give people hope that cancer is not a death sentence, first and foremost. And second of all, let's examine what mainstream medicine is doing here to treat this. And should we really be following exactly what mainstream medicine is doing? And of course, I'm not giving out medical advice. Everyone has to make their own decision. But if this theory is correct, so my broader theory of disease is that the root cause of disease is, as we've discussed, oxidative damage from toxins. How does mainstream medicine treat cancer? Well, they give people toxic chemicals in the form of chemotherapy. So chemotherapy is notoriously toxic. It was originally, I believe, derived from a weapon of war called mustard gas. And that's part of the strategy. They basically have the view that, well, cancer cells are vulnerable to toxins, so all we have to do is add more toxins to the mix in order to push the cancer cells over the edge so that they die. And sure enough, it is true that if you actually give toxic chemicals to someone with cancer, it can actually shrink the cancer tumor. But I argue that it's doing that in an unnatural way. It's doing that by overloading the cancer cells with toxins. And the way that we know that it's unnatural is because people who often do chemotherapy and have tumor shrinkage or disappearance will then typically often have a rebound tumor in the future. They'll have a new tumor formed in the future. And we can understand that from my theory's perspective in the sense that a cancer tumor is a toxin storage vault. It is packed full of microplastics, heavy metals, seed oils, oxalates, forever chemicals, and other toxins. And when you then add more, and of course that can explain why they're vulnerable to toxins, because they're already packed full of toxins, right? So if we add more toxins, they're kind of at the edge and then they could die. So when people add chemotherapy to the mix, what that does is it bursts open the cancer cells, right? All those cancer cells burst open. And now what did that do? It just released all of those toxins back into the body fluids. And now all those toxins are free to roam. They're free to damage the body's organs. They give you kidney damage, liver damage, arterial damage, damage all your vital organs, right? So now they're free to cause all the damage that they wanted to do. And the body has to scramble in order to build a new tumor. And that's what a rebound tumor is. A rebound tumor is where the body is scrambling to try to, grab onto these toxins and shove them into storage. I like to think of a tumor as a jail cell or a prison cell for toxins. It's like, imagine we have all these criminals kind of roaming freely throughout our body fluids, and the body says, I'm going to build a prison cell to lock those criminals up. Anyway, I feel like that's like a nice little analogy for how to think of a cancer tumor. And but that's how mainstream medicine treats cancer, is that they add more toxins to the mix. And the problem with that is that toxins appear to be the root cause of every disease: diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, kidney disease, and heart disease. And so that means that if you give someone extra toxins, you could actually drive them to get a new disease. you could drive that person to get Alzheimer's or diabetes or Parkinson's or something else. So that's the concern with that. And of course, other mainstream therapies like radiation therapy have the same underlying mechanism. In the case of radiation, it creates ROS as well through a different mechanism. It basically rips water molecules apart. So whenever the X-ray radiation comes in, it rips apart water molecules, and then the resulting OH is the hydroxyl radical, which is an ROS. And so that's another way that you can add ROS to the body and then overwhelm the cancer cells as well. So it's the same basic idea. And, naturally, that's what I would call an unnatural approach to shrinking your cancer tumors. Now, what would be the natural approach? What would be the way of doing it according to my theory, right? Toxin sequestration theory says that the body builds tumors to store toxins. And so if you want to shrink your cancer tumor, why not just reduce your toxic load? Why not just reduce the amount of toxins that you're intaking? And then the idea is that the body could decommission its storage vault when it no longer needs it. And that has a name in the medical literature. It's actually called spontaneous tumor regression, or STR. There's hundreds of cases documented in the medical literature where people have gotten the cancer diagnosis and then abstained from the conventional treatment. So they opted out of conventional treatment. And instead, what they did is that they got on a low toxin diet and a low toxin lifestyle. And then these people just naturally witnessed their tumors gradually shrinking and sometimes fully disappearing over time. And we can understand that from the viewpoint that, well, a cancer tumor is like a backup detox organ. And if the toxic load goes away, then the body doesn't need a backup detox organ anymore, right? And so the body can just kind of dismantle and decommission its extra detox organ when it doesn't need it anymore. So that would be the natural approach. And I have, of course, highlighted the fact that the carnivore diet appears to be the lowest toxin diet. I've already talked about some of the toxins that carnivore cuts out, things like seed oils and glucose and fructose, the sugars, as well as the plant defense chemicals, the oxalates, deuterium as well, and many of the toxic metals it also cuts out as well. So carnivore appears to be the lowest toxin diet. And so it would bode well for potentially using the carnivore diet as a treatment protocol for trying to get this spontaneous tumor regression phenomenon, right? Trying to shrink your tumors in a natural way. And so that's my belief for why the carnivore diet, seems to work quite well when treating cancer. And of course, some people come at it from a different angle. I recognize that Thomas Seyfried comes at it from the angle of ketosis, but that views basically ketosis as the magical secret sauce, as opposed to viewing low toxicity as the magical secret sauce. And, it could lead people down the path to do something like a plant-based keto diet, which could still be high in oxalates, right? So you could still be getting a lot of toxins on a plant-based keto diet and not, getting that full, potential for spontaneous tumor regression that you could if you went full carnivore, right? Because if you went full carnivore, then you'd be cutting out even more toxins. So in that sense, I believe my theory kind of pushes the carnivore diet above the keto diet in terms of how effective it could be. Okay, I'll just stop there to see if you have any comments or questions or anything. Any thoughts?
Yes, I do. Actually, I actually agree that, because it's very popular. I mean, I wouldn't say, maybe not popular. It's gaining a lot of traction in the community space about this theory. So, because it makes sense that, carnivore being the lowest toxin diet. So just that alone, right? And I like how your analogy of like the tumor being like a jail cell or like a storage box, where they could just contain this. So like away from the main body, the main tissue. So yeah. Also, I'm curious about this question. Just wanted to add, does this theory like extend like beyond cancer, like maybe some chronic skin conditions? I have eczema, psoriasis, and autoimmune disease. So do they like play a role like within this framework? Because I know the analogy, right, which is the tumor being the storage. Like, what about like something with psoriasis where the skin flares up? Like, is that like an indication something going on deeper in the body? Would that be an indication also, but maybe not a storage box? Is there a connection between that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we have to look at it on a case by case basis. In the case of autoimmune conditions, I actually view those as genuine, real diseases. So not defense mechanisms, but cases like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, that's considered an autoimmune disease, type 1 diabetes as well, MS, those are all considered autoimmune diseases. And I am viewing those as real diseases where the toxins are actually damaging the body's tissues and organs. So in the case of Hashimoto's, the toxins are actually destroying the thyroid. In the case of type 1 diabetes, the toxins are actually damaging the pancreas. And in the case of MS, the toxins are damaging the cells that make myelin for the myelin sheath. So autoimmune conditions are different in the sense that those are real diseases where the toxins are destroying the body's tissues. There is, however, an underlying beautiful philosophy of the body being brilliant, amazing, and strategic, once again, and it does not attack itself. So mainstream medicine views autoimmune conditions as the case where the body is attacking itself, and that's what's the cause of the damage to the tissues. But that doesn't make any sense from this view that the body is brilliant and strategic. In my theory, more broadly, we can understand why people see autoantibodies as basically a secondary effect. So after the toxins damage the tissue, then the body has to deploy the immune system as a cleanup crew, basically to come in and sweep up the dead cellular debris and clean up the mess. And so that's why you'll see autoantibodies, is because the immune system is just cleaning up the mess that the toxins caused, right? It's the toxins that were the root cause of the damage. So, and I'm not the only person to say this. There's other people, basically casting a lot of skepticism on autoimmune conditions. I believe Anthony Chaffee has also cast a lot of skepticism on autoimmune conditions. But nevertheless, they fit into this broader philosophy that, hey, like, why would the body attack itself? It doesn't make any sense. Like, if the body is brilliant and amazing, it's not going to attack itself. So anyway, autoimmune conditions do appear to be a real disease, but they're not an autoimmune disease. They're not, it's a misnomer, right? Like, the name is wrong. So, and then with the skin conditions, a lot of the skin conditions are actually defense mechanisms. I'll just give you an example, a simple example. So like, some people have allergic reactions on their skin. For example, if someone puts like cheap jewelry on their skin, which has nickel in it. Now, nickel is a toxin. It's a toxic metal. This actually has a name. It's called nickel allergy. Nickel allergy is where when you put cheap jewelry on your skin, you get all these red bumps on your skin, a whole bunch of little red bumps, and you get all these flare-ups on your skin. Now, what is really going on there? Is it that you're allergic to nickel, or is the body doing something? What's really going on is the body is forming those little red bumps to sequester and store the nickel so that it doesn't get deeper into your tissue. So it's actually forming those bumps as little mini vaults, little tiny mini storage vaults, to actually store the nickel so that the nickel does not get inside your body. It's actually preventative, preventing the nickel from getting inside. So it is a defense mechanism, and that's a skin condition called nickel allergy. But, like I said, there's a lot of other similar kinds of things. You can imagine probably things like poison ivy, where someone gets like poison ivy on their skin. That's probably also a defense mechanism as well, because most likely the ivy has poisons in it. And right, so it's like walling off the toxic chemicals in the poison ivy in order to prevent it from getting into the body. And then, there's a lot of other cases where, moles and age spots, those are melanin-based storage vaults. So melanin is actually a metal chelator. Melanin is like responsible for pigment. And moles and age spots have that kind of brown color. And that's the melanin. And melanin is a metal chelator, so it actually stores or like binds to toxic metals. And so we can view moles and age spots as basically storage vaults for all the toxic metals, things like mercury, arsenic, cadmium, lead, excess iron, excess copper. That's what's stored in moles and age spots. And then there's a whole bunch of skin mini vaults that store what are called lipophilic toxins. These are fat-soluble toxins, so things like seed oils, microplastics, forever chemicals. So that would be things like lipomas. I personally have a lipoma from back when I was on the standard American diet. It's probably because I was eating too much seed oils. So it's just basically like a storage vault for seed oils, right? It's crazy. So, and other similar kinds of toxins. So like microplastics, forever chemicals. That's what gets stored in a lipoma. That's also similarly what gets stored in skin tags and sebaceous cysts, which are all kind of like skin growths. So a lot of these skin conditions, and I admit I haven't dove deep yet on psoriasis. You mentioned psoriasis. I still need to investigate that more. So I'll get back to you on psoriasis. I'll write a blog post on that. But it may follow the same pattern as some of these other things. So yeah.
That's awesome, Patrick. Yes, I'm so excited for you to cover that.
Yeah.
As you continue to, once you delve more to the psoriasis section, I know to me it feels like they all have similarity when it comes to the defense mechanism. That's when they're all like the same. It's just like different way of trying to protect the body. The main cell. So So when you continue, while you continue developing this theory, what are some of the unanswered questions you're still trying to answer? Like, are there any evidence, or maybe you would have to revise, or part of the whole theory?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm developing a holistic theory of disease that's meant to cover not just cancer, but actually all disease. And the root cause of that disease is actually toxicity in my theory, so toxins. Other people, like Anthony Chaffee, actually has very similar views to me. He believes that the root causes of disease are toxicity and deficiency. So he identifies nutritional deficiencies as a potential additional cause. So I'm still working on this because I still believe that we might be able to unify these views because I think many nutritional deficiencies can cause disease by via toxicity, actually. I'll just give you two examples. So if you have a zinc deficiency, then that opens the door for the toxic accumulation of heavy metals. Because zinc's job is basically to protect your body from heavy metals, or that's one of its jobs. It's one of zinc's job is to protect your body from toxic metals. So if you have a zinc deficiency, then that could lead to the accumulation of toxic metals. So that can explain why zinc deficiency can lead to diseases. Similarly, magnesium deficiency can open the door for like aluminum toxicity. There's other kinds of examples like this, but so I think one of the open questions is, can I unify Anthony Chaffee's view with my view that basically all deficiencies cause disease via toxicity? In other words, that like the fact that you have a deficiency basically leads to the creation of ROS, reactive oxygen species. So that is still my conjecture. I believe it's true. And so I'm going to try to work on that idea, which is basically showing that nutritional deficiencies end up creating oxidative damage by creating ROS in the body. And then we'll be able to unify Anthony Chaffee's view with my view. So that's one thing that I plan on working on. But I am still, I would say, marching along, and just to verify that toxins can explain every disease. So today I'm actually writing a blog on MS, multiple sclerosis, and I'm planning to release that soon on how toxins are the root cause of MS. And I know you've interviewed someone who had MS and cured it with the carnivore diet. So I can explain that by the fact that carnivore is the lowest toxin diet. So yeah, but as far as, cancer itself goes, I think that I mean, that's actually the part of the theory that I'm actually most confident about. I feel like I actually have a lot of evidence. Sometimes people will ask me like, oh, like where's the evidence for your theory? Well, I presented tons of evidence for my theory in my blog posts, and we can actually dive into that evidence. Like I have so much evidence supporting this cancer theory, and it's pulled directly from the medical literature. So I feel like the cancer side of my theory is like rock solid. It's really rock solid. I have evidence that the toxic metals are high inside cancer cells, including aluminum. I have evidence that oxalates are high inside of cancer cells. I have evidence that seed oils are high inside cancer cells. I have evidence that microplastics and forever chemicals are high inside of cancer cells. I have evidence that asbestos is high inside of cancer cells. So I have this long list of medical literature saying that they've looked inside cancer cells and they have found all those toxins at very high concentrations inside of cancer cells relative to normal cells. And I can cite papers for that. So, and then similarly, I can also cite papers saying that they're not actually using the toxins for any nefarious purpose. They're actually just storing the toxins. So like whenever the seed oils get inside the cancer cells, they're just stored inside of lipid droplets. Like there's these balls of seed oils just floating around inside of cancer cells. They're not using the seed oils for any purpose. And similarly, when it comes to the microplastics, they just store the microplastics for safekeeping inside their lysosomes. They don't really do anything with the microplastics. And then same for the toxic metals. So they have like balls of iron, which is a toxin, and when it's in the free form, in the metal form, it's a toxin. And they have balls of iron just floating around inside the cancer cells. So they're not actually using the iron for growth. They're just storing it. So, and I can cite the medical literature saying that they're not using these toxins for growth. And then similarly, the toxins aren't getting into the cancer cells by accident. So it's not like, oh, the toxins managed to just accidentally get inside the cancer cells and then they cause some DNA mutation, which then triggered the cell to go cancerous or something. That's actually not what's happening. The medical literature is saying that the cancer cells intentionally pull in the toxins. They actually increase the amount of transport to pull in the toxins. So they have more transporters to pull in the seed oils, more transporters to pull in the toxic metals, and they do more transport of microplastics to pull them in as well. So anyway, so I've tried to address all these concerns that people might have, right? Like, oh, what if the toxins are just getting in by accident? Or what if the cancer cells are using the toxins? No, that's actually not what they're doing. So anyway, so I try to just push back against the doubters, because obviously there's skeptics who doubt the theory, by saying that I can give you better. If people are skeptical, then just send me an email and I'll email you the papers that show that this is true. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
That's awesome, Patrick. Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I've listened to some of your interview podcasts, and understanding this whole theory, also having the three main principles, also I think is one of the key to really understanding this whole thing, and you being able to provide like evidence to this whole thing is also really awesome. So I guess my last question about this whole theory is that well, actually, because I feel like I have a hard time explaining carnivore or just translating the whole message, even to my own parents. The whole logic of carnivore, they're still not accepting it. So I'm thinking, like, how would I translate this message? as simple as possible to my parents who doesn't even believe me in carnivore, right? So I guess if this theory were broadly accepted one day, like how would it change the way we diagnose or like prevent cancer or treat chronic disease? Yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll just mention my own parents are the same way. So, yeah, my parents aren't carnivore either. They're not even keto. And I've tried really hard to get them to get on this diet, but they just want to do their thing. And fortunately, I do have control over what my kids eat, so I can make sure that they're on the diet. And it's tough. We've talked about, you and I have talked about how it's good to just kind of gradually give the message to people kind of recurringly over and over again. And hopefully we can gradually undo the brainwashing and get people to recognize. In the case of carnivore, there's already a lot of good messaging out there from the carnivore doctors where they point out that this is the ancestral diet. This is what our ancestors ate. We want to get back to our ancestral living. And, this actually jives really well with my cancer theory, because I would argue that my cancer theory is the only cancer theory that says, go back to your ancestral ways, go back to the ways that our ancestors were healthy, right? Our ancestors didn't have all these health problems. And so we want to basically try to mimic the way that they lived. They lived in an era where big pharma did not exist, right? There was no big pharma at the time of our ancestors. And so other cancer theories will say, oh, just take this pharmaceutical or whatever. Even some of the theories, like, for example, I'll give you an example. There's a parasite theory of cancer, which says that cancer is caused by parasites. And that advocates taking big pharma products, ivermectin and fenbend, which are repurposed pharmaceuticals. Those are made by Merck, which are like big pharma products. That's not very ancestral. That's not the ancestral way of doing things. And so that's just yet another way to get people back into the pharmaceutical system. It's yet another trick. It's just another way to get people taking pharmaceuticals again. So I would argue that my cancer theory is the only theory that really says, hey, just eat meat and live a low toxin lifestyle, get out in nature, try to remove toxins from your water, your air, stay away from industrial pollutants and these kind of things. Try to get back to the way that our ancestors ate. And then if you do have a cancer tumor, your body won't need it anymore whenever you reduce your toxic load. It can decommission its storage vault when it doesn't need it anymore. And of course, I also will point out that there is a hyper focus on fighting the tumor instead of fighting the true enemy, which are the toxins. The toxins are the true enemy. And that's why I try to tell people that it's really not enough to just develop a cancer theory. You have to develop a holistic theory of all disease, because once we understand that disease is caused by toxins, now we can understand the motivation for why the body would build a cancer tumor in the first place. Because the body is saying, oh, I can't have these criminals roaming around freely. I have to lock them up in a jail cell. And so that's why we have to understand all diseases together. We can't just think of cancer in isolation. We have to think of cancer together with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc. And I have a recent blog post and video saying that actually brain tumors prevent Alzheimer's. They're actually anti-correlated in the sense that people who have had a brain tumor are less likely to get Alzheimer's in the future, which means, they've done like population-wide statistics where they've, checked conditions that people have had, and they found that basically there's an inverse relationship between brain tumors and Alzheimer's, which suggests that actually brain tumors are sequestering the toxins in the brain and preventing those toxins from damaging the body's brain tissue, from damaging the nerve cells in the brain. So it's very interesting that the cancer is actually preventing the real disease, which is the Alzheimer's. So anyway, I'm hoping that we can sort of convince people to basically go back to their ancestral ways. And also, there are many people who are in the carnivore community who might have cancer and are using the carnivore diet intuitively to treat cancer, but maybe they don't have the theory to back it up, right? They sort of intuitively feel like, I feel like this is the right approach to do carnivore, but maybe they don't have the theoretical justification to back up their approach. And hopefully my theory can give them confidence and say, hey, you're doing it right. Like, this is a good approach. Like, this theory backs up what you're doing. So yeah, I'm hoping to give people confidence there. And yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's awesome. I mean, I'm already biased. I feel like, this whole theory is, the correct understanding of how the whole cancer, like the whole cancer, treating it, like diagnosis. I think this is it, but that's just me, Um, Patrick, I want to get back to the carnivore questions. So I guess we can start with your motivation now. Like, uh, are you like sharing your story like because you're feeling good, helping people become aware? Like, I know you mentioned about spreading awareness about this whole theory to help people, right? Are you also frustrated with the current medical guidelines, the nutrition? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the most depressing things is like, it's easy to be in a bubble whenever you're just living at home, but one of the most depressing things is the travel. So like if I go to an airport and I fly somewhere and I see what people are eating at the airport, it's insane, right? It's like, it makes me realize like, oh, I really am the oddball here. I really am the weird one, right? Because 99.9% of people are doing non-carnivore, non-keto. They're eating all the processed foods, all the toxins, and of course, on top of that, it's being fed in the schools to the kids, right? And I think I've advocated in the past for carnivore as being a kids' health movement because the kids are the ones who need it the most, right? They are the ones who really need this low toxin diet the most, and they're developing, right? We saw with my 6-year-old son how it made such a massive difference for him because we intervened at such a young age. And so I believe that the carnivore diet is a children's health movement. They're the ones who need this the most. Of course, it helps adults too. Obviously, it helps people of all ages. But, we're talking about the difference between someone being mentally delayed versus being mentally advanced. That's a big deal. That's like a big deal from just being on carnivore for like a brief period of time. So like you get massive gains when you intervene in a young age. So yeah, so I think that I am trying to make this as a kids' health movement, but at the same time, we're fighting battles on so many fronts, and I'm also, of course, trying to spread this cancer theory, trying to spread TST, because there's like children's hospitals being built to treat cancer for kids, and this is really scary to me because they're building hospitals right now as we speak to treat childhood cancers, and they're using chemotherapy and radiation and all the standard protocols here. And this is really heartbreaking for me, right? Because my theory is saying like that's the exact opposite of what you should be doing. You're not supposed to add more toxins. You're supposed to reduce the toxins. So yeah, so I feel like I have to push really hard on this cancer theory as well to also help. But yeah, and I appreciate, what you're doing with your podcast, telling people's stories. That's really what resonates with people. And, we just have to keep spreading the word. And I also think that this is not easy because, sometimes people, even within the carnivore community, will have different opinions, but we have to try to stay united. Like, let's try to stay together as a community because we're fighting a lot of evil external forces who don't like the carnivore diet, who don't want people to discover the cure for all diseases. Big Pharma, for example, they don't want us to know the cure for everything, right? So if we can stick together as a community, and we can really be a powerful force.
Yeah, I think it just made me think about the whole hospital for kids. I think it makes sense now, about the toxins. I know you did cover it earlier about the radiation and the chemo and then more toxins into the body. I think, yeah, to me, that makes a lot of sense now why this whole theory apply. So Patrick, like in your carnivore journey, like did you had any assumption what was causing your health issues like before, finding out about this whole diet, the lifestyle, right? Like Did you think it could be work stress related or general environment, specific food trigger, or maybe you're just over exercising? I had so many assumptions with mine. Like, what about you? Did you had some?
I had no idea, honestly, and I was too trusting. The sad thing is I'm a scientist, so I'm supposed to question things, but I was very trusting of my doctors, and they told me things like my cholesterol was too high, and I believed that. I believed the cholesterol myth. When I was 40 years old, it was about back in like 2020. I saw my general physician, and he tested my cholesterol. It was too high, and he told me I need to eat more oatmeal to lower my cholesterol. And I listened to him. I really did. I listened to him. And then I got worse and worse allergies. My allergies got much, much worse after adding more oatmeal to my diet. So I would say that before I discovered this, field of like diet-based medicine, I was largely just listening to my doctors and believing everything they said, pretty much. And I would just follow the standard treatments. I think that obviously the pandemic tended to wake up a lot of people, because there was a lot of strange advice during the pandemic that didn't make logical sense. So I think that got a lot of people to question the medical system. Maybe that was what I needed. Maybe I needed that sort of wake up call to get me to question things. And yeah, so maybe that's what happened for me.
Oh wow, yeah. I think yeah, it definitely is the pandemic for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole thing was not completely unexpected just for the general society, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the whole censorship thing. Yeah. What was your favorite food back then? I think we covered it in the first interview.
Well,
Did you think it was
yeah, I
the
mean,
oatmeal?
yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
I used to, because my mom is Italian American, so I was raised on a lot of pasta, right? So I ate a lot of pasta growing up. Um, and Yeah, and she would make homemade pizza and everything. I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to like get tempted. So, but now I would say now my favorite food is, yeah, I mean, I love steak. It's so boring, of course, right, to say, but like nevertheless, like, yeah, I love eating steak. I do sometimes eat raw steak. Half the time, I'll eat like raw hamburger meat. Other times it depends how I feel. Sometimes I'll cook it sometimes, but yeah, I mean, I just eat a lot of steak and burgers. And just last night, our family went out to a restaurant. It was a new restaurant we'd never been to, but we just said like, hey, can you just give us like burger patties with cheddar cheese and nothing else? And they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. So, and restaurants will accommodate you. And so I feel like we can make this lifestyle practical. And yeah, so, and then when I'm on travel, I will carry around those like little carnivore bars in my backpack. So yeah, those are pretty good actually. But yeah, my favorite food now is pretty much just like sirloin steak. I like sirloin steak. T-bone steak is also really good. You can go to Denny's. Like we've been just going to like chain restaurants. You can go to like a chain restaurant like Denny's and get steak and eggs. Like it's actually really good. Uh, so yeah, that's what I eat now, right?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, because when we travel, like with my family, we also look for Denny's, so
Mm.
so that's
Yeah,
how I eat pretty much in the morning. But
yeah.
that's for travel. Yeah. Patrick, so I remember we watching one of your shorts video. I think you talked about like eating raw meat. Is that still part of your lifestyle, or has that changed, or have you like mixed things up? Like maybe you know what? Maybe you can walk me through the whole typical day of the week of what you eat now.
Yeah, I mean, a year ago, I went on this whole raw kick where I was trying to eat like mostly raw meat, like rarely cook my food. And I did that for several months. And I do think it's healthy. I do think it's like even more low toxin. I mean, it's not like you. okay, so basically you do create some what are called AGEs when you cook your food. So like advanced glycation end products. These are just minor toxins. They're not the worst toxin, but nevertheless, yeah, when you cook your meat, you get a little bit of these AGEs. But nowadays, I would say that, I do cook a lot of my food, but I still particularly enjoy raw ground beef. I do still eat quite a bit of raw ground beef, a little bit of raw steak, and but that's only when I'm at home. I try to be flexible. I want this to be sustainable for the long term. It's very obvious that if I'm going out to a restaurant, I'm going to have cooked food. So I am flexible with respect to cooking, and I'm not as like strict when it comes to eating more raw or not as I was a year ago. A year ago, I was really into the whole raw fad, but nevertheless, yeah, I mean, technically, I think raw meat is slightly healthier than cooked meat, and so. And when I did first start carnivore, I will point out that I had a craving, like an actual craving for raw meat. Like my body was like, eat it, eat it, eat it. It was like telling me in the background. And then I was in the middle of New York City, in Manhattan, and I decided one time to just try it. Like I walked into a grocery store that had like a butcher counter, and I just said, "Oh, give me like a burger patty," and they just gave me like a raw burger patty, and then I just ate it right there. Like I ate it right there in the grocery store. So and that was like the first time that I really tried it, and I was fine. I didn't have any problems. So after that, I lost my fear of raw meat. I was like, okay, well, I can handle that. So yeah, and anyway, it's like I said, it's not like a crucial part. Like you don't have to eat raw meat. I don't think it's crucial for health. You don't have to do it if you don't like it. But nevertheless, I would say it's like slightly healthier than cooked meat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, the whole experience in New York, eating raw meat in front of the butcher. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Patrick, have you done something, something unconventional, like I guess within the carnivore framework? I know we've we've come across like some people who doesn't brush their teeth, or maybe they don't take shower or like once daily. I remember Bella saying that she only takes shower once a week. Some people use beef tallow to rinse their face. There's so much more. I think like other ones like eating specific organs. Yeah. What about you? Have you done something unconventional?
Yeah, I have. So I went down that whole path. I stopped using shampoo a year ago. The reason I stopped using shampoo is that it's really hard to find a non-toxic shampoo. It's almost impossible. I tried. I couldn't find a non-toxic shampoo. So I was like, well, why do I need to shampoo my hair? I haven't shampooed my hair in a year, basically. So it's been a year, no shampoo. It looks fine. And then I started in. I think you've talked to Blaze, and Blaze also has some videos on this. But I followed his advice. It was his advice that got me to try this. But I also tried reducing my shower frequency, and also reducing my usage of soap as well. So now, believe it or not, when I shower, I do not use soap anymore. So I just use water. I literally just shower with water alone, and I just rub the water on my skin. I don't even use soap. So I do not use soap in the shower. Obviously don't use shampoo. And when I do shower, it's not very often. It's about, like you said, it's about once a week. Every once in a while, it'll be twice a week, but like, yeah, it's about like once every 5 days I'll shower, something like that. And the other thing is that it's actually really hard to find a good shower filter. So I have a shower filter, but it doesn't filter out all the toxic metals. There's still probably like fluoride in the water and toxic metals in the water. The shower filters only filter out like a small subset of chemicals. So I'm just like, well, I'm not going to shower as much then. So why would I want to shower in dirty water? And then, yeah, I have also stopped brushing my teeth. Although, I do still every once in a while go to the dentist for like teeth cleanings, but I've stopped brushing my teeth as well. And that's fine. That's also leads into my theory because In my theory, dental tartar is actually a protective defense against toxins. It's a calcification. So it's a way of the body storing oxalates and fluoride and other toxins as well. So calcifications actually fit into my toxin sequestration theory as defense mechanisms. So we can view tartar as the body defending itself from toxins, just like cancer tumors. So in other words, dental tartar is not the enemy. Just like how cancer tumors are not the enemy, dental tartar is not the enemy. The true enemy are the toxins. And the reason people have bone loss, like things like osteoporosis, is because the body actually uses calcium to bind to toxins. It deploys calcium as the good guy to actually stick to toxins and bind to them. And good examples of those toxins would be oxalates and fluoride. So oxalates and fluoride are two toxins that the body uses calcium to neutralize. So it just points out to people that, think of your dental tartar in a different way. Don't think of it as the root cause of some disease. Think of it as a defense mechanism against the toxicity of oxalates and fluoride, actually. So, and some other toxins as well. So yeah, anyway, that's my sort of hygiene strategy. Yeah. So I've definitely taken away several things out of my routine.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's pretty awesome because I'm doing the same thing. Well, close to it. I only brush my teeth once also. So once a week. And then I still do flossing and what else? Mouthwash. So that's about it. So I'm thinking, eliminating more of it because I don't have any cavity. So I don't see the need for it. And I just feel refreshed, just doing mouthwash. So yeah. But Patrick, is there anything hard about being carnivore for you? Like with you and your family, because the whole family's carnivore pretty much. What about how do you guys do in social gatherings? The travel, I'm sure you've gotten over the cravings in the beginning. Is there anything hard for you and the family?
Good question. I mean, we have to avoid a lot of restaurants and we have to sort of vet restaurants before we eat there usually. So we have to, and then when we do go out to restaurants, I have to give them a long list of caveats. I'm like, no seed oils, no seasonings, I have to tell them exactly how to cook things and, so yeah, that's minor convenience. I would say that overall it's not hard. You can do it, you can make it work. And I don't want to complain because I don't feel like it's that hard now. I mean, in the past, we had some issues with whenever we were in the public school system, they were policing our lunches and things like that. And that was a problem. And then we pulled the kids out of school. So that was an issue. But I think that, but now we're fully adjusted. The kids now have the routine, so they're not going to ask for any weird foods. I don't want to paint it like carnivore is hard to do because I feel like it's actually not that hard as long as you're willing to put in the effort and, select your restaurants carefully and things like that. So yeah, overall, I think it's not that bad.
Yeah. I missed this one question because you were addressing about the oxalates earlier. And I know from one of your YouTube shorts, you also addressed a different what do you call this? So besides oxalates, I think it was copper detoxification.
A different detox, detox. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How was that whole experience? Did it took weeks or a month? Was it something similar experience to oxalate dumping?
Yeah. So 2025 was the year of oxalate dumping for us. That's when we got a lot of oxalates out of our body. And then in 2026, which is this year, that's the year that we're doing the toxic metal dumping. Originally, I thought it was just copper, but it's actually a lot of metals. And I know that now because I've done the hair tissue mineral analysis. And it's actually a whole range of metals, including things like arsenic, mercury, aluminum, uranium, and some other more esoteric ones like chromium and manganese and vanadium. But anyway, there's actually many toxic metals that we're dumping right now. And interestingly, I would say that the reason we're doing it this year and not last year is that last year we were eating quite a bit of shellfish and some liver as well. And both liver and shellfish do have a lot of these metals in them, the toxic metals. And the general rule is that your body does not dump toxins out of storage until you reduce the toxins that you're intaking. So like the body doesn't detox when you're intoxing. And so the only reason why I think our detox was delayed by a year is because we had to cut out those additional foods, the shellfish and the liver, in order to access this additional detox. Yeah, I would say that it's been a tough detox. Like oxalate detox is kind of nice because it's all physical. It's like, okay, I have some pain in my kidneys. I have some pain in my, painful urination. I have maybe some issues with my eyes or something, some dental tartar. The nice thing about oxalate dumping is it's all physical. But the problem with toxic metal dumping is it's really mental and emotional. And that's what makes it actually a harder detox to go through, because the symptoms of toxic metal dumping are things like anxiety, sadness, depression, mood swings, irritability, anger, and rage. That's where the temper tantrums come from in the kids. And so there's all these annoying mental symptoms, and it's frustrating, especially as a parent, because you see it happening in your kids and you're like, well, why is my kid being so angry and irritable and moody? Well, they're dealing with toxic metals. So yeah, so I would say that the toxic metal dumping has actually been harder than the oxalate dumping. It's been a more difficult experience. And if people are interested in this, I suggest that they do get a hair tissue mineral analysis, an HTMA, where you just trim off a little bit of your hair and then you send it off for analysis, and they check to see the toxic metals inside. So because that can really guide your thinking. But the good news is that I think we're making a lot of progress on it. We've been doing the toxic metal dumping since like February of this year, but I think things are getting better. Finally, things are finally looking much better now. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's great to hear. And also about the hair analysis. I think I'm going to try to do that as well. Patrick, so I know I've asked you this question last time. If you had to describe the impact of the carnivore in your life, what one word would you describe it, and tell me why?
Yeah. What would one word describe it? Oh my gosh. Wow. That's a hard one, isn't it? So, I think last time my answer was life-changing. And it
Yeah.
certainly is. Maybe this time I'll say eye-opening, right? I'll say eye-opening this time because, if I hadn't gone on the carnivore diet, I never would have discovered this new cancer theory, right? If I hadn't gone on this carnivore diet, I never would have discovered this toxicity-based theory of disease. And so in that sense, carnivore has really opened up my eyes. And I've talked to, for example, Stephanie Seneff. She's the one who inspired my cancer theory about this. And we both had a distrust of mainstream medicine before we dove into cancer. And we both admitted that our distrust of mainstream medicine just skyrocketed after we investigated cancer, because cancer appears to be the case where mainstream medicine is kind of like misleading us the most. Like they're lying to us the most on the cancer side. And so it's very sad to me because I already didn't trust the medical system. And now my distrust of mainstream medicine has just skyrocketed now that I have this new cancer theory. And, but like I said, I would have never discovered this if I hadn't gone on carnivore, because carnivore is what allowed me to recognize things like oxalates as toxins, seed oils as toxins, glucose and fructose as toxins. I mean, who thinks of glucose and fructose as toxins, right? No one except for the keto carnivore community does. And even there, people are still unsure. But, but most people just think like, oh, it's like a fuel source. It's like, oh, I drink my sugary drink to get fuel or energy, right? Not that that's actually a toxin. So I would say carnivore really has been eye-opening for me because it sort of is the reason that I've managed to have this new theory of disease.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. So, Patrick, knowing what you know now about carnivore, it's been 20 months, close to 3 years, you guys, going to be carnivore. yeah, knowing what you know now about the whole lifestyle, if you can give an advice or maybe a suggestion to someone who may have a chronic issue and they see how much success you and your family had with carnivore, same time they're skeptical, heart issues, um, different from what their doctor is saying. What advice or suggestion can you tell them?
The best thing is to just try it for like a month, say, and see how you feel. And there are ways to ease into this. Personally, like I said, in my case, I eased into carnivore by first going keto and then switching to carnivore later. But there may be even a better strategy, what I call the steak challenge, where basically you force yourself to eat a steak every single day. And by forcing yourself to do that, you'll necessarily eat less of the other things. So doing the steak challenge can be a good way to sort of go on this track to eventually reach the carnivore diet. But yeah, I think people have to just try it to really, because I do remember distinctively when I first went on this diet, feeling a feeling that I think I never had felt before, right? It was a new feeling that I had never felt before in my entire life. And so that's not something you can really explain to people, like the feeling like you have like you don't have any pain in your joints anymore. You have like good energy, good mood, you feel good. And so I think that my advice to people would just be like, just give it a try. I mean, you've already tried pharmaceuticals and Western medicine, and that hasn't solved your problems, right? Why not try steaks and and just eating meat? Yeah, that would be my advice to people. And and of course, like if you just trust the medical system on one thing, why would you trust them on something else? Like if you just trust the medical system on, say, the pandemic or like COVID vaccines, then why would you trust them on nutrition? Like it doesn't make sense. Like chances are if they're wrong, if they were wrong in the pandemic, they're also wrong about what foods to eat as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great advice. Patrick, what about for those who have been carnivore for over a year? Let's say, because I think you really have a good grasp on the oxalate dumping and the other metal, like toxicity dumping as well. Like what if they've experienced all the benefits inside that 1 year, but then after a year they're saying, I don't feel good anymore, something is wrong, and they could be experiencing oxalate dumping, but they don't know it, or maybe lacking in electrolytes, another toxin dumping, a different one. What can you tell them? Should they just like stick with it, or maybe just try tweaking, or listen to another carnivore? Maybe somebody else might have had that experience.
And yeah, it's a great question. And there are a lot of carnivores who tend to fall off after a year. Paul Saladino is a good example. There's another influencer, his name's Face IQ. He just left the carnivore style diet. So there are people falling off. That, I believe, reflects a lack of understanding of detox. And because as we just discussed, when you do go on, if you've like eaten the standard diet for, say, 4 decades or 5 decades, and then you go on a really low toxin diet, your body is like finally able to dump those toxins out. And it's so thankful. It's like, oh, thank goodness, finally the streets are clear. Now I can dump the toxins out. And, the toxins don't go straight from the organ to the urine or wherever, or your poop or something. They have to go via a pathway. And so along the way, they cause problems, right? So when the toxins get dumped out of your liver or your brain, they're stored deep in your organs, right? And so they cause problems as they go from those organs to the excretion routes, right? And so that's why people are getting these symptoms, right? That's why they're getting all these fatigue issues and mood instability, like I mentioned, irritability, and insomnia, getting woken up in the middle of the night sometimes. So, but keep in mind that those minor detox symptoms are better than actual real diseases, right? It's better to have detox symptoms than to have a disease. And so the alternative is to go back on the standard diet and then get actual real diseases. So I'd rather have a little bit of insomnia than to actually have a disease. And, and I will say that I'm still not fully out of the woods yet. I do believe that I've gotten most of my oxalates out, but I'm still detoxing the metals right now. And so I still have a little bit of insomnia every once in a while. It's not bad. It's really not bad. But I think the idea is that it gets better over time. Every month that you get into, that you get deeper into carnivore is another month that you have less toxins in your body. So I would encourage people to stick with it. There are some minor supplements that you can take. I generally try to steer people away from supplements, with the one exception being the essential minerals. So things like zinc, magnesium, potassium, calcium, those are like the essential minerals. Those are the only supplements that I personally would consider to help with these detox things. But other than that, I try to avoid supplements because I don't feel like it's that ancestrally relevant. Our ancestors were not mega dosing vitamins. They weren't taking, high dose multivitamins and things like that. So I tell people to keep it simple. There are some pitfalls, and people can go down the wrong rabbit holes. And that can actually be the reason why people fall off carnivore, is maybe they focus on the wrong supplement. Like they'll take like some high dose vitamin C or something. They're like, oh, I'm not getting enough vitamin C or whatever. Or maybe they'll focus too much on the exotic organ meats, the liver and the kidneys. They're like, oh, like these are like so nutrient dense. Well, like a steak is very nutrient dense. Like you're going to get the nutrition that you need if you eat a steak, right? You don't need to go full blown liver and kidneys, because in my theory, liver and kidneys are detox organs. And you don't really want to be eating detox organs because there are toxins inside of those organs. That's their purpose, is to actually store and process toxins. And so there are pitfalls where people focus too much on eating organs like liver and kidneys, and then they get toxicity back into their system. So I would say to people, just keep it simple. Like you don't have to overcomplicate it. Eat steaks, eat burgers, eat some eggs, whatever. Like eat the usual standard carnivore diet, the normal muscle meat based carnivore diet. And that is the pathway to healing. And it will allow your body to detox, and you will get some symptoms, but you have to kind of power through those detox symptoms. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, Patrick. Thank you for explaining that. I feel like I really like, your whole explanation about detox being better than the disease. You don't want to have that. If you can just have this detox experience, I'm satisfied. And also, maybe taking the wrong supplementation, I think that's also a big possibility. Might be overdoing it. Yeah.
Right.
Patrick, my last question to you is your future outlook with this whole carnivore community. How do you see it, the whole thing, like in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you see carnivore in the good or in the bad? The bad meaning, we'll probably see pushback from the media. Meat prices skyrocket, right? Censorship probably. The good, more people talking about this, and also more people diving in deep, like maybe more theory similar to yours, like coming up. What are your thoughts?
That's a great question. And we've already seen what I view as attacks on the carnivore community. So if you look at last year, we saw weird fad diets being introduced. There was a diet that was called the sugar diet. That was like a viral fad where people were only eating sugar. And we saw a lot of emphasis on, like, say, only eating sardines. And I pushed back actually a little bit on this only sardine diet, because I always felt that steaks were better than sardines. And I sort of viewed that as kind of yet another pitfall. And, people can look at my channel for a deeper dive into why I think that the only sardine diet is not a good approach. But in any case, there was also the big push to add carbs back in. If you remember in the fall of last year, there was like all these carnivore influencers who were adding carbs back into their diet. And people were calling us dogmatic for not wanting to do that. Like they were saying that, oh, we're so strict and dogmatic. Oh, we're so rigid. And, but that was the thing that got us the health in the first place. The cutting out of the carbs and all that stuff, that's what got us healthy in the first place. So of course we're dogmatic because that's what got us healthy. So anyway, there was multiple instances that I saw last year of our community being attacked by special interests. And that was my view, because there are people who really do not want, the carnivore diet to spread. And so I think we have to be prepared for that. We have to be prepared for the fact that we're going to continuously be attacked, psychologically as well, like with these like psychological warfare tactics where they want to basically trick us into thinking that your diet is not optimal. And I'm going to give you a subtle point here, but, I don't need to monitor my ketone levels because I don't care about my ketone levels. But there is a big push now where people are saying like, oh, are you in deep ketosis or not? And like everyone checking, like, does it really matter? Like if I remember Anthony Chavy saying that like he doesn't measure his ketone levels because he just knows that he's eating the ancestrally optimal diet. And what the special interests want you to do is they want you to be paranoid, like, oh, maybe just eating steak is not the optimal diet. Maybe you need to eat this other diet where you get even higher ketone levels. Well, in my theory, that might be introducing more toxins. So I just want people to be aware that there's going to be a lot of like pitfalls and ways to try to psychologically manipulate us to get us away from what we know is the correct diet, which is just eating kind of like beef, right? Basically, or, beef as well as some other similar foods. And but also you pointed out the potential issues around pricing. That is another way that people may attack our community, is by trying to drive up the price of beef. I am worried about that. I'm not going to lie. And I do hope that carnivores will consider maybe getting into ranching, or somehow, obviously everyone tries to support the local ranchers, which is good. But, I am worried about beef shortages in the future. I think that will be another way we're going to get attacked. So yeah, but it's going to be an ongoing battle. I can't definitively say like, oh yeah, the future is all, rainbows and all beautiful, because I don't really think it's going to be beautiful like that. I think we are going to run into a lot of psychological warfare and economic warfare for the carnivore diet. We have to continuously be fighting, but the way that we can fight most strategically is to stick together as a community, continue to do these podcasts, these interviews, that you're doing, and try to support each other. We should really try to, support each other's channels. And that is, Big Pharma's nightmare whenever we're kind of united and we're all like working together to spread our message, I would say. So, yeah.
Yeah, Patrick, that's very well said. I agree with your whole outlook. I don't think it's ever going to be like, just a rainbow, for the future. But I resonate a lot, you saying that, as a community, we have to like stick together, even if we have like differences of opinions. But when it comes to this matter, I think, we have to stick together. Yeah, because we're going to get attacked like different angles, psychological warfare. Yeah, there's so much more. Yeah. Patrick, if people want to reach out or connect with you, where's the best place to reach you?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. My handle is Oxalate Warrior, and I put out videos regularly there. So that's first and foremost, people can check out my videos. Also, I do write blog posts for people who want to dive deeper into the theory. I write blog posts on Substack. Now, because I am trying to spread my cancer theory more, I'm now on both Facebook and Instagram as well, so people can find me there as well. But for the most part, I would say YouTube and Substack are my primary platforms.
That's awesome. I'm going to make sure to post all of them in the description so people can reach you. Patrick, thank you so much again for joining me. Really enjoyed hearing your journey, the theory. Also enjoyed listening to your YouTube shorts. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and perspective. Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Really appreciate it.